What is up, everyone? Prometheus here. So today I'd like to talk about something different. I've said that multiple times in different videos where I do something different, but this time I'm going to be talking about villains. Villains are one of the main aspects of a story. Not all stories have villains, but most do, and villains act as the force going against the hero of the story. The villains have appeared in every piece of media: anime, movies, video games, TV shows, books, everywhere. And there are some are good, some are bad, but one of the most common thing with villains is that they're evil. Most of them, I mean, some of them can be sympathetic villains, some even good guys, misunderstood, but others are just outright pure evil. Now, I want to talk about the most evil villains of all time. Some villains whose evil rivals and even surpasses the evil of real life figures. I'm talking villains like the Q from All Tomorrows, Judge Holden from Blood Meridian, Am from I Have No Mouth, I Must Scream. Am is often considered by many to be the most evil villain of all time in all of fictional media. Well, I'm here to tell you that there is a new king of villainy, a villain that makes Am look like an absolute child of a computer. Like, I cannot stress this enough. This villain is so evil that the devil himself would start praying by the sheer mention of his name. This man is so evil that he makes hell look like if you like him. He makes hell look like paradise. Like hell would look like a sun-soaked vacation in comparison to just spending a few minutes in a room with this guy. That's how bad he is. Speaking of, the book he is from is also the most vile piece of media. The book series he's from is the most vile piece of media ever created by man. Its brutality, its dark, how dark it is, how disturbing it is, how violent and gory it is. It is absolutely top one. No other piece of media rivals it. No horror movie can wish, like, all horror movies wish to be as brutal as this book series. And all that brutality, all that evil stems from the main villain of this book series. I'll just refer to him as him because this book series isn't out yet. And I should know because I am its author. That's right. I'm creating the most evil villain of all time from the most vile piece of media ever written. Now, my goal with this character is to create the definitive, unanimously considered most evil villain of all time. In all of media, all of fiction. And it will show he is not a single good shred in his body. He is just the most vile, most cruel, most outwardly sadistic, most evil villain. He makes Satan look like a absolute saint. Like, like, let's say the devil read this book. If the devil read this book, he would go into panic, start crying, start praying to God. If he heard someone merely mention this man's name. That is how bad he is. If you got the devil himself crying and praying, then you know you're the worst of the worst. In fact, his evil is too much for even hell. Nothing is, in fact, there is no punishment you can ever think of that can punish this man for what he does in the book. Now, speaking of the book is just ugh. It's dark, it's brutal, it's a fantasy novel, and it's like, okay, you're probably thinking it's gonna be like Game of Thrones, and no, I wouldn't really compare it to Game of Thrones because honestly, the violence in this book makes Game of Thrones violence look pathetic. It makes Game of Thrones look like a fairy tale that you could read to your kids in comparison. It makes Blood Meridian, the one of the darkest novels ever written, it makes it look like a baby's bedtime story in comparison. Makes Judge Holden look like a pathetic little child. The villain of this book makes Judge Holden look like a pathetic little child. Makes Am from I Have No Mouth When I Must But I Must Scream, previously mentioned before, makes him look like just a little baby computer in comparison. It makes him look like a calculator in comparison. The Q Honestly, he makes them look like some harmless little puppies in comparison to him. Like some of the other most evil villains of all time, Morgoth and Sauron from the Tolkien Legendarium. Yeah, they're barely Dark Lord. You know what? No, they're just little weaklings compared to this man and his evil. Like the Joker, he makes the Joker look like an absolute joke. Yeah, pun intended, totally. But yeah, I'm not kidding. He makes the Joker look like a joke. Every other villain is in shame because they cannot measure up to this man. A villain that honestly might get me nuked off the face of the earth. I wouldn't be surprised that when I publish this book series, it's probably going to be like banned in so many countries within days. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if it gets banned in America, and that not much stuff gets banned in America these days. But this, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. This book, it's now let's put some more emphasis on the violence. The violence in this book. Oh my goodness. It's just absolutely... It is the most violent piece of media ever. Think of some of the most violent horror movies of all time. Even some of the ones that are like real. Yeah, no. Those ones look more like children's shows, children's cartoons, Saturday morning cartoons that a kid might tune into in comparison to this book series. It honestly makes David Howard Thornton look like some of David Howard Thornton's characters look like absolute just little average Joes compared to this guy. Makes Damien Leone's movies makes them look like it honestly makes Damien Leone's movies look like kids films. Like, I don't know how that turns. It looks like it makes all other like violent pieces of media, like horror movies, even snuff films, makes them look like child's content in comparison. Stuff you'd see on YouTube Kids, stuff you'd see on a child's channel. You know, it's just let's say this book was ranked on the list of the most violent pieces of media of all time. The gap between this book and number 2 would be longer than a light year, because that is how... Now, I'm not insane, don't worry. Simply how it was hard kind of coming up with all this brutality in this book, making it as vile as possible, and all the brutality in this book, all the violence that puts all other horror movies, all other over-the-top brutal anime, all other violent novels. It makes real-life serial killers sick to their stomach. It would make Hitler look like an angel sitting up in heaven in comparison. Like, this, it's absolutely just, it's abysmal. It's like, I'm writing the book right now. I'm writing book 1, and once it's finished, I'll post I'm not going to be charging money for it at all, don't worry. I'm going to be posting book 1 on the channel on the posts tab. Also, quick reminder that you have to be, people under the age of, let's say, 20, 21 years old cannot read the book. Let's put it to 21 years old, because even then, 18, 19, 20 years old, I don't think you have a strong enough stomach to read this book. Like, it took Mayor Dragon, he read a single paragraph from this book. All it took was a single paragraph, and he was already disgusted by it, and I do not blame him. I myself, the author of the book, is disgusted by it and by the villain, and all of that vile brutality. It's all stems from this villain. Now, this artwork I have of the villain, I didn't draw this. I am terrible at drawing. No, I'm a part of a D&D club, and a good friend of mine from there, he's a really good artist. He drew this for me. I described the villain to him. He drew this for me. And I bet you're wondering, who is he? He's not your typical fantasy villain. Yeah, he's a Dark Lord, but he's more than just, a bland Dark Lord with, all I want to do is do evil things all for my own pleasure. I mean, that is kind of what he is, but there's more layers to him. He's intelligent, he's manipulative, but above all else, he's sadistic and hateful. And just gonna let you know this right now. All the violence and brutality, the darkness, the hatred, and all the gore and everything, it's not for no reason, for shock value. No, it's to send a message. All that stuff is tying back to a message about war, about hate, about violence, and it's. I'm not gonna reveal the whole message because the book isn't even done yet. But I'll put book one up. You may read it and think, okay, this is absolutely vile, but I wouldn't call it the most vile piece of media ever. That's because it only gets worse the more you read. And once you get to some of the later books in the series, you will be convinced that this is the most vile, most brutal, just darkest piece of media ever created by man. You might think it's impossible to top it. Even myself, I don't think I can ever top this book in terms of brutality and evil. The fantasy world in this book is not like Middle Earth, where a lot of people really want to go live in Middle Earth. Whereas in this fantasy world, you want to live anywhere else but this world. The world's beautiful, but with this villain in it, this world looks like just it makes hell, again, I've mentioned this before, it makes hell look like a vacation, makes hell look like a paradise. This fantasy world makes hell look like paradise. This villain makes the devil look pathetic, like a little weakling, a little ant that he could easily step on. And just the violence, the people in this book don't suffer just quick beheadings, quick stabs to the heart like in other fantasy books. No, the deaths are painful, slow, and are described in great detail. And most of these deaths are at the hand of this man and his allies. The most evil villain will be, I'm confident, I'm not saying he might be, he will be the most evil villain ever in media, and he is likely to never be topped. Like, he's gonna go beyond just this book series. He's gonna appear in later series, different. It's gonna be just the threat of this man. It is just, I can't, like, people. If people try to comprehend the evil of this man, of this character, just they would go insane. They would go down into a dark path trying to comprehend this. They would go insane. In fact, the most strongest, toughest man in the world, let's say Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson would puke by the sheer mention of this man's name. Mike Tyson would start crying. Now, no disrespect to Mike Tyson, he's one of the greatest fighters of all time, but I don't think even he has a strong enough stomach for this book. In fact, even like strong fictional characters, tough characters, they can't handle this book, and this villain he's the stem of it all, and I have no problem calling him the most evil villain of all time, and he will, not might, will be unanimously considered the most vile character in all of media ever, dethroning any other villains other people have put to fiction. If this book is made into a movie or a video game, that movie or video game is getting banned in so many countries. Hollywood would refuse to fund a movie based off this. In fact, the actors would puke during production. That is how bad this is. That's not bad. Well, I don't know if the book is critically good. It's kind of experimental one to see how people are. If it ends up being bad, I'd listen to the criticism of the book and try and fix it with other books I'm reading. But one thing that I'm confident with this book is whether you think he's a good villain or not, this guy is still the most evil villain of all time. I cannot talk about what he does in the book, but it is beyond our comprehension what he does. Like, there's no limits to how vile, how brutal, how sickening his acts are. And just, it's like one scene in particular, it's slow. He kills someone, and it's slow, it's painful, and every move is made to cause as much pain as possible, mentally and physically, and even after death, the pain isn't over. That is how bad this is. I cannot talk about the details of what happens in the book. If I mention once a single sentence from this book describing one of the painful events that happens, this video would get nuked off. No, this entire channel would get nuked off the internet. In fact, if I published this book and I simply speak the name of this villain, it would be like saying a very offensive term, a very offensive swear word, and this channel would get nuked off the face of the earth. But once it's done, I won't be talking about the book too much on the channel. I'll simply post it. But it's just vile. It's a whole nother level. Like, demons from hell wouldn't want anything to do with this book. They would much rather endure the torture of hell than to read a single chapter of this book. Reading this book is torture because of how sickening it is, how terrifying this villain is and what he does to the people of this fantasy world. It takes dark fantasy to another level. Like, he makes the white-haired the white-haired villain guy from the dark fantasy anime and manga, what was it called, Berserk, I think. But he makes that guy, who I think a lot of people really hate, the white-haired guy in the bird suit, makes him look redeemable, makes him look like a public idol, a saint. Like, who's the current, like, the most evil official villain of all time? Let's say people like the Q, Judge Holden, Am, Morgoth, Sauron, the Joker, Nemesis, the Scarlet King from the SCP Foundation. They all would pale in comparison. All of them. Some of them would even just go insane by trying to think of this man. Someone simply saying this man's name would drive someone insane within seconds. If you read this book, but the sheer shock of this book, the sheer brutality would bring people's heart rates up. People could get heart attacks from reading this book. People could get heart attacks from hearing the sheer mention of this man's name. It's just absolutely how do I describe this? Just absolutely, just unfathomably evil character, unfathomably dark and brutal book that, like, no other book in existence. Like Game of Thrones, again, makes it look like a fairy tale with the fairy godmother, with whimsical wizards and crap. Like, it makes that makes Game of Thrones look like just little kids' fairy tale. Dare I say, it makes the real world look like a paradise, and the real world's terrible. And hell is even worse, but it makes hell look like a sun-soaked vacation. It makes hell look like heaven. It makes, like, it's just, this fantasy world is, because of this man in the book, this fantasy world is an absolute bloodbath of a world filled with hatred, with pain, with war. It's not something for the faint of heart, and I definitely wouldn't recommend it to people who don't have a strong stomach. In fact, I only recommend this to the toughest, the strongest people, but even then those people would probably break down and cry reading this book, because although it's a brutal book for sure, it is not completely devoid of, like, heartwarming moments. There are a lot of characters in the book that I want people to grow to love, but even then they are not. They all end up being victims to this man. And just overall, the book is just, like, no one is free from this man's grasp, and his evil, his hatred. And honestly, there is I'm gonna say this now, he has no sad backstory, no reason to be doing all this. He's simply doing this all for the fun of it. It's just absolutely astounding how brutal this book is. Like, I don't think an R rating would be even good enough for this book. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this book was made, oh, you have to be 50 or older to read this. Like, I'm not even 50. It's not. That's how bad the book is. I'm not saying the book is like terrible, like critically terrible. I'm trying to make it as good as possible. Like, so far, the first rating I've gotten for the book is like a 6 out of 10, which is okay, I guess, but I'm trying to fix that up. And then I got like a 7, 8 out of 10 once. So far, it's getting a bit better, but I'm trying to make this character, like, I'm still sticking with this character being the most evil of all time. And, like, I can't stress this enough. When you're reading this book, be prepared to puke, to have a high heart rate, to cry, to just vomit. You might need to buy a new book because the first one's covered in your vomit. You start sweating, you start crying, you start breaking down, you start highly disturbed by every sentence that you read, every paragraph, every chapter. And you just there's no competition. This is the most vile piece of media ever created by man, ever. And the most evil villain, most vile villain in all of media, all of fiction. And everyone who reads this book will absolutely agree that there is no competition for that. This book will more than earn the title of the most vile piece of media. And this villain will just absolutely just steal the title of the most evil villain of all time. I highly anticipate to see what people may think of the book, which will be coming soon, book 1, once it's finished. I will post it for free on the channel, and remember, I cannot talk about the book, any details of the book, because, again, I mentioned it's very brutal, so I can't bring that up, because this channel is for all ages, but the book that I'll be posting is not for anyone, like, I might even say 25 years old once you're fully developed. That's, like, this book, this piece of media is absolutely vile when adults have to be a certain age to read it. And all of that stems from this villain. All of the brutality in the book stems from this villain. Like, and any anime villain, any horror movie villain, any other fictional villains, they would all just be crying. They would, like, after seeing this villain, God might rethink sending these guys, the other ones, to hell. Okay, that's kind of a bit far-fetched, but that's how bad it is. How bad this villain is. How terribly, just absolutely evil. Now, also, this villain does take on different designs, different forms in the book. So this one right here is only one design for him. He takes on other forms in the book. You'll figure it out once you read it, and there are a lot of twists and turns, a lot of characters you might grow to like. But remember that none of them are safe from this man. I won't say what he's named, but once the book comes out, you'll see. I won't say when it's coming out, but it's not coming out for a few months, I think. Right now, I'm like maybe a quarter way through writing the book. I had to take a break because it was really hard thinking up all these just brutal things. Like the recent brutal horror movie series, I forgot what it was called, but with David Howard Thornton, with Damien Leone's, the one where people are puking from the first scene, people having heart attacks. Yeah, no, this book would make those movies look like things that you would show your kindergarten student, things that you would watch with your baby before they go to bed. That is how brutal it is. Like, if this book was made into a movie, then people would probably be dying from heart attacks, choking on their vomit within the theaters from the first few scenes. In fact, no, from the opening scene, from the first few minutes. Hey, people probably be having that reaction when reading the book. So on watching a movie, or I think the best way to adapt this book would be into an anime series. Not really anime, not like over the top action shonen, more so like a Ghibli style, or no, more like Berserk. I think it would make a good anime similar to Berserk, like or Fullmetal Alchemist, just minus all the quirky moments because this has barely any levity in it. Berserk. Sorry if I'm saying the name of Berserk wrong. I think I might be pronouncing it wrong because never read it, though I do know a bit about the villain from it. Forgot his name. Gryffindor, I think. Or no, Gryffindor's from Among Us. I mean, Gryffindor's from Harry Potman. The thing about the little witch. And I hear the villain from there is also also really bad, but honestly, he is nothing compared to this. He people like all these other villains shouldn't even be talked about in the same breath as this one because they are all pathetic little weaklings, little disappointments in comparison to this. Like they look like puppies in comparison. Like let's say this: would you rather be trapped in a room with every other villain in all of media, so, like some of the most evil, like think horror movie villains, Michael Myers, Hannibal Lecter, Freddy Krueger, Pinhead, the clown guy from Damien Leone's horror film, uh, and Judge Holt, like all the other some of the most evil villains, including the devil himself. Would you rather be trapped in a room with all those villains for the rest of your life, or for the rest of your life, like, but where they can't like be trapped in that room with all those villains, and and they can do whatever they want with you until you inevitably die at their hands? Would you rather do that, or would you rather spend just a few minutes in a room with this guy? Yeah, if you read the book, you'd probably rather spend like the rest of your life in a room with some of the most vile villains and real life figures like the devil than just spend a few minutes with this guy. Because honestly, the stuff this guy would do to you within a few minutes just makes anything that any other villain, like anything the devil himself could do to you, makes all of that look like, honestly, makes it look like a relaxing back massage, like makes it look like a nice good night's sleep, just a nice little dream in comparison to this. It makes all of those look like fun experiences that you would much rather have than what this guy could do to you in a matter of minutes, than what any other villain and even the devil himself could do to you within like hours or even years. Like I've been rambling on about this for so long. Like I cannot stress this enough that this guy, it's absolutely sickening. And the worst part is it's coming from a person like me. I'm not a bad person. I'm always trying my best to be nice to people. I'm not perfect, but at least I'm trying to be a good person. Everyone should try to be a good person. Mayor Dragon's a great guy. I'm trying my best to be a great guy too. And yet, after you read this book, you'd think I'm an absolute psychopath for coming up with something this vile. Just know that reading this book, I'm not a psychopath, though it did take a lot of, like, just mental vomit to come up with this. You may call me a splatterpunk author, I guess. I think that's what it's called, but it's more of a fantasy author. Brandon Sanderson is my favorite author. He's the one who inspired me to start writing. Stormlight Archives is, in my opinion, the greatest novel series of all time. I think Brandon Sanderson is the greatest author of all time. Like, I don't think this book would be as good as Brandon Sanderson's work, but I will say my villain is just absolutely more vile than any other villain in any book, any kind of media, book, movie, anime, TV show, video game, anything. Anyone from real life too. Like, he makes Francois Viet like, yeah, Francois Viet, as irredeemable as a person he was back in the time he was alive in France, he makes him look like, I don't know, just an upstanding citizen. And if you don't know, Francois Viet is the most evil person who ever lived. I will not dare not say what he did, because what he did is still affecting people to this day. I might make a video talking about him, because he honestly makes Hitler, like this man, this guy also makes Hitler look like an angel. Though then again, the gap between the Francois Viet and this guy is astronomically large. Like, once you hear what Francois Viet did, then you'll probably agree with me. But then again, he looks like an absolute saint compared to this man. Like, I've been throwing around terms all over throughout this entire video, but I still cannot stress this enough. You see this picture right here, think, oh, it's nice artwork. But once you read the book, you cannot bear to look at this artwork, because this face right here will be the scariest thing you will ever see, because of what because you know what he does. It is absolutely sickening. I have other artwork of other forms of this man, but I can't do that because that will kind of spoil certain aspects of the book. But just know this. Don't think that, oh, this book's not going to be that bad. You're probably just over-exaggerating. What I'm saying right now doesn't do justice. It's an understatement. All the stuff I've said is an understatement. All the comparisons I've made is an understatement, and it will not prepare you for the absolutely vile thing you're about to read, and the absolutely vile villain you're about to become. Like a whole new feel. Like, honestly, they would probably have to make a whole new phobia just for this guy. Like, I cannot. I'm at a loss of words. It's just, honestly, just once it's out, you'll know it's a fantasy book, but don't think it's like other fantasy books. It makes Game of Thrones look like a fairy tale. It makes real life snuff movies. It makes them look like stuff you could watch with your little 3-year-old kid, even your baby. Like, sit down on the couch with the kid in your arms watching that. That would be a much better time than just reading a single paragraph from this book. But if you think you can handle it, then go in knowing that nothing can prepare you for the absolutely vile contents of this book, all committed by a man more evil than even the devil himself. In fact, the devil himself would pray to God and compare it just by the sheer mention of this man's name. Thank you for watching. I will provide more updates on the book once it nears its finish. See you in the next one.